Hello everyone, welcome to this video. This is on a Citroen DS3 that has got the N14 1.6 THP Prince engine in, co-developed by PSA, which is Citroen and Peugeot, and BMW. Some say it's the worst engine ever made, but it should never really have been left entrusted to the members of the public to keep her on regular oil changes and oil levels and stuff like that. Anyway, when it's running, absolutely fantastic engine. There's many things we could talk about in terms of its weak points. That's not for this video. What I'm specifically talking about in this video is crankcase pressure. The reason that this has come about is because this car is literally, although it does go on the road, it's literally for track days. So the last track day I did, which was actually the first track day I did with it, it was absolutely going great. But what happened was the crankcase, you can see here, excuse the sun, the crankcase over pressurized and it popped this dipstick out and splattered oil everywhere. Not a big deal, you know, not dangerous or anything, but just I didn't want to carry on with potential for oil coming out. Didn't really know what the problem was. So when I got home, I basically started doing some research. First thing I did is I've got a big pressure vacuum gauge. I plumbed it, I took this out, got a fitting, plumbed it into the dipstick hole there, and found straight away that I was running quite big pressure. Now, a quick lesson on the PCV system on here. It's a sort of dual band PCV system. When the engine is not under boost, there's a rear PCV line, and you'll see here that this one of mine's disconnected. Again, my testing led me to believe there's plenty of negative pressure. Putting a catch can in here, which again, if you know about these engines, you'll know about the fouling of the back of the intake valves due to the fact it's direct injection and port injection. So that's, again, that's for another video. So the restriction of this is a Mishimoto type catch can. The restriction in there makes very little difference. It's obviously reduced the vacuum pull a little bit, but not enough, and later in the video we'll talk about the pressures. So that back PCV line is when the car is just driving normally, which is most of the time. Now what happens when it's on boost? Obviously the intake manifold is seeing the boost, and that boost travels up this pipe, or in this pipe, up this pipe, whichever one's connected, and it shuts this valve here. At the same time, there's a valve to the front PCV line which opens, which allows crankcase pressure to pass out this front PCV line and out into the inlet duct in front of the turbo. Now, I'm not an engine designer, but PSA, BMW are, and this is a very finely balanced system. So of course we come along and start messing things around, and yeah, you might get higher airflow, but then what you end up doing is you end up messing around with the fine balance of the crankcase breather system. Now, the biggest issue you have, if you want to get bigger power, you need to have a greater airflow. And again, I think the Mini, with this engine in the Mini intake system is integrated sort of into the bonnet. So I think don't have it so much in the Mini, because the Mini mainly they just put a high flow air filter in the original casing. And why this is important is all that original ducting, and if I just quickly show you over here, all the original ducting, here's mine, most of it, there's an old turbo there. This pipe is missing. This is the one that goes down into the turbo, and I butchered it to get this heater element off. As you can see here, all this restriction, air in here, through the filter, back down in here, it all creates restrictions, and those restrictions make the turbo pull air from anywhere it can. And obviously this is that front PCV line, and the way that this fitting here fits in the pipe, sorry I haven't got the pipe, basically as that air comes round and into the turbo, it speeds up, and basically across the end of this fitting here, it causes a Venturi effect. So what it actually does in this front PCV line on the factory setup, it actually pulls a vacuum through here. So if you bear that in mind, when we come back to this part of the engine, you can see that if it was a factory, that pipe would come down here and into the turbo. As the air sped up and went round the corner of this restriction into the turbo, it causes a Venturi effect across the end of that fitting I just showed you, which then, when this valve shuts under pressure, this one opens, and then it's not so much the pressure from the crankcase, although the pressure from the crankcase will open this valve, it's more designed that the vacuum created by the Venturi effect of where this fitting goes in front of the turbo pulls out the crankcase gases. Again, really, you know, finely designed, so that I think they're looking for round about plus or minus half a PSI, so 38 millibars ish vacuum on the back and vacuum on the front. But they also say, again, my research is that you can have no more than 38 millibars pressure. Obviously the problem you have is if you have too much vacuum, you'll end up sort of pulling more oil through and maybe burning more oil. But if there's too much pressure, it can end up blowing seals out, and you can have leaks all around the top of the rocker cover, your crank seals, and it can be pushing oil out everywhere. And again, that will sort of could potentially pushing more oil out here, putting oil down in front of your turbo. So again, you have to think very carefully when we sort of go away from the standard factory design. Anyway, I hope this is not going to be too waffly. I've obviously kept this front PCV line intact. I haven't used the original one because it was a little bit too bendy. I've managed to get enough fittings to make it work right with this one. Now, this was the setup I had when the dipstick got blown out. Now, what I've done since then is I've fitted a brand new, well, this is a Febby built-in, really good quality aftermarket rocker cover, and I think potentially that was where my problem was. I think there was a potential problem with this valve. So when it was on boost, it wasn't allowing enough air out, and I think it overpressurized the sump. Now, again, I hope I'm not waffling on. When you're driving these cars normally on the road, right, no matter where you live or what sort of road you've got, unless you've got an amazing bit of road somewhere that you can basically keep absolutely mashing through the gears and keep this on full boost for sort of 5 or 10 minutes at a time, you're not going to replicate the sort of conditions you'd have on a track. So when you go on a racetrack, literally you're either hard on the brakes or hard on the power. So it spends a lot of time with this front PCV line being open, the back one being shut. So that was I think what happened, to build up a pressure because I was on the turbo and full boost for so much. So where we're at now is I've basically got a monitoring system where I can monitor crankcase pressure. Pretty simple really. Ordered a separate oil cap, and I've plumbed it all the way through the bulkhead. And what we've got here, and I will put a link in the description if anyone wants to know, this is a simple, cheap dual port manometer. So two tubes go in the top, you only need one, and what it does is it measures positive and negative pressure. It can measure the differential, but we don't need to know the differential. We just need to know positive and negative. So that's all rigged in there. If I switch it on, you can see, there we go. Is it zeroed? No, it's about 1.1. But what you should do before you use it, and you'll see in the video, is you press and hold this button here. And again, whenever any testing you do, you have to do pretty much on the same road to get the same results, because atmospheric pressure will obviously vary depending on your altitude. So yeah, it's pretty simple. This is plumbed in, you set it to 0, and then when you start the engine, obviously any pressure that's in this crankcase or vacuum that's in the crankcase will be measured by this manometer here. So what else did I do? I was slightly concerned that the way that this intake in front of this turbo, the way that the factory one was designed, it came in down here, and as I showed you earlier, that heater valve went in at sort of 45 degrees, and that is exactly how you create this differential in pressure that causes a Venturi effect, which would suck out this this crankcase pressure. So why is it not doing it with this system? Well, it's not doing with this system, A, because this isn't really facing the right way, and B, because there's no restrictions in here. As I said earlier, we've got rid of all of that pipe that went up here into the airbox, through the filter and back down again. We've got rid of all of that, which is why we can get bigger power. We need more airflow. But what comes with that is there's not as much restrictions in front of this PCV line. So it means that the turbo, when it's searching for air, is pulling air. It can pull it all through this filter here. Whereas when it's restricted, if this is open, it'll try and pull it through here, which is why this is all finely tuned. So what have I done? In my simple mind, I pretty much thought, well, I need to reintroduce a restriction into this system here to basically help cause maybe a Venturi effect, but also make the turbos try and search more air from wherever it can, because there's a slight restriction here, and pull a bit more out of here. So how did I do that? Well, basically, pretty simply, I went online and bought, here it is, excuse the mess in here. This is it. So this is a velocity stack, used to go on carburetors. Basically, it's 75mm across there, which is exactly the same size as the inlet of my air filter, and it goes down to 50mm here. And what I've done, or what I'm going to do and show you, is pretty simple. Is I'm basically take this air filter off and put it in, wedge it in between this aluminium pipe here and the base of the filter, what that does is then cause this restriction. But what it does is it funnels the air in through here, and as the air speeds up, as it goes across the port here for this PCV, it should help create a slight Venturi effect, which should help pull some more gas out of there, some more crankcase gases out of there. Now again, you'll see later on, we don't quite get a vacuum, but it does help in reducing the pressure in the crankcase. So I'm going to stick that in there, and then we can take it out and do some tests. I'll just quickly show you so you see it makes sense. You can see there's a very slight lip in that air filter there, in the plastic, in the rubber I should say, and that, look, is just right, 75mm. That velocity stack sits in there. So basically, as you can see, all I do is, and again, when you look at this aluminium pipe fitting here, that velocity stack, look, basically, if you can see that, that just fits in there and treats. So all I do is push it on, and this sits between that lip in the rubber of the filter, and then I tighten it up. So basically that's causing that little bit of restriction, but it's helping channel the air, speed the air up as it goes past this hole here. It should create this sort of Venturi effect and help reduce the crankcase pressure. So let's stick that on. So what I've done, I've taken it all apart because it makes sure that I get it back in properly. Also, it helps to explain it. So here's the aluminium tube that the filter and the filter sits in and goes into the air intake pipe there. So this Venturi stack, not Venturi, I keep calling it Venturi, it's not Venturi, it's a velocity stack, just sits in there, and then all I'm literally going to do, look, is just push. Can you see? Just going to push that filter down on top of it. I can't do it one-handed, but I'll just push that down onto it. So as you can see, that's in now, and you can clearly see that, you know, I've got that in there, and I don't think you can clearly see that. So that's in nice and centralized. Again, this is going to become permanent, so what I may well make it a bit more permanent, because this is only push sandwiched between this aluminium tube and that little sort of rubber shoulder on here. I'm not worried it could come out and damage the turbo, but obviously if it comes out and slips, it's going to be disrupt airflow. But you can clearly see there, the air is going to come in through there, right, and this velocity stack is going to cause that air to sort of speed up, and as that air speeds up, if I grab this bit now, as that air speeds up, can you see that? So this big hole here, look, that is where the PCV line comes in. As that fast air sort of travels across there, and you can see it kind of gets, this is off center here. So as that fast air travels across that hole there, I can't remember, is it Bertolli's effect? I can't remember. But basically that would cause the Venturi effect, which would end up sucking in, causing suction into this PCV line. Now again, this Venturi effect, you'll see that in a minute when we go to testing, it's not good enough, it's not effective enough to cause a big vacuum, but it definitely causes some vacuum enough to reduce the pressure in the crankcase. But let's get that all put back together, get it on the car, and then we'll go do some testing. So that's all back on, and just a quick side note, I know a lot of people are saying, oh, there's no point putting these air filters inside a hot engine bay. I've got a little bit of duct work to do here, cowling, heat shield work to do here. As you can see here, there's a 3-inch flexible ducting there that comes straight up through where the front fog light used to be. There's a vast amount of air comes in through there, and obviously it gets heated back up when it goes through the compressor, but that's what the intercooler's for. So yeah, and this has got a larger front mounted intercooler in there as well. So yeah, that's that. Let's get it on the road and go for a test drive. Right, here we are out on a road test. Now I'm doing this video. This is the first video I'm doing showing basically the results, but I haven't actually done the main video showing how we've got to this point. So I hope it works out in the video. But anyway, here we are, we're all set up. Let's turn on the manometer, as you can see here. Now what we need to do each time, I don't know if you can see that, maybe I can focus that in a little bit. We need to zero it every time, because obviously atmospheric pressure can be different depending how high or low you are. So what I'm going to do here is just press and hold this hold button. What that'll do is clear it, and it's really important that each time, if you're measuring, each time you zero it. Now, if depending on what part of the country you live in, whether you live on somewhere fairly flat or whether you live somewhere fairly hilly, obviously this is going to alter depending on the atmospheric pressure at what altitude you're at. So I think it's fairly safe to say you could maybe give this a 2 millibar sort of plus or minus. You'll be somewhere in the range. Bear in mind 2 millibar is a tiny pressure. So and this has got a light as well, but I haven't worked out how to keep that on. But anyway, this will stay on for 20 minutes. So the boost gauge is in the back, in the front there. I don't think you can see that, but listen, here we go. So we start it up, and straight away at idle, what are we looking at there? We're looking at sort of 30, what is it, 32, 36, sort of mid to late 30s millibars. So that's perfect. So what I'm going to do now is really simply, I've got a nice straight bit of road here, no traffic on it. I'm going to go, you'll see as it comes on boost, you better tell when it comes on boost, because it'll go from a minus figure to a plus figure, and it's this plus figure is the really important one. I think from my driving already done, this sort of minus 33, 35, 38, even minus sort of 45, 50 millibars is still, you know, that's a pretty decent vacuum. It's not too much, it's only just over half a PSI. 38 millibars is 0.5 PSI. As again, I'm probably sure I've mentioned already in this video, we're aiming for sort of neutral pressure, slightly on the negative side. But as you'll see here, when we come on boost, we go from negative to positive, but it's that important. We mustn't go above, or we must be looking for about 38 millibars. So anyway, enough talking, let's get on with it. So straight on boost, you see we're in the plus figures. So now I'm going to go give it a long pull, and you can see what it actually does on my boost. It starts off high. Now you see, now we're just cruising normally, sort of, that's what we're at. We're not on boost. Minus 36, what's that, 37, 40. So, you know, we're in a good space. So if I just drop the throttle back on boost, you're in really good shape there. Again, I'm trying to concentrate on the road, but you probably noticed that when you first come on boost, in the sort of the lower part of the boost, before you get to the higher boost, it's slightly higher, and when you're on higher revs at higher boost, you'll notice that the figure comes down a little bit, and that is because because I put the restrictor in the air filter. As that air is drawn past that front PCV port in my air intake, it starts to pull more. So it doesn't quite pull a vacuum, but it's obviously reducing the pressure. So let's go again. I'll let that car go a little bit because we'll soon catch him up. I know it's a bit waffling, a bit technical, but so here we go. Just steady acceleration, second gear, third gear. So here we go, in third gear, no boost, just cruising along. Let's get a little bit further up the red range, get it into sort of roughly where we need to be. Slight bit of boost there, look. You can tell we're not on boost. Let's get to 3,500. So there we are, 3,500 revs. Now let's just nail it. 5,500 RPM, that's what I want to be changing. So we're in really good shape there. 15 millibars is absolutely tiny. And as I said, I hope I've explained in the video, I don't know if you can see that, I hope I've explained in the video, the camera's not wobbling too much, that this is a track car. So when you're on track, depending on what track it is, you spend a lot of time on boost, and this is where I was having my issues. So there we go, look, that is my crankcase pressure. That's my negative pressure, is sort of getting up to about minus 48 millibars, and my positive pressure is settling at sort of 20 millibars. Again, fairly flat here, but you could give or take 2 psi. What I'm going to do, it's a bit backwards, but I'm actually, for my own interest, is I'm going to go back, take out the velocity turret that's in the air filter, and see what difference that makes. Right, so just to show I can't do it one-handed, but I've taken the Jubilee clip off and undone the filter, and you can see that here's that little velocity stack I put in, and I think whether I explained it or not, but that just sort of restricts the air slightly. It creates faster moving air as it runs through the intake piping, and hopefully causes this sort of Venturi effect in front of this front PCV line. Again, it doesn't cause vacuum, but it does create enough pull to keep the crankcase pressures low. But anyway, I'm going to take that out, put that back on, and go for a drive and see if there's any difference to the pressures. Right, here we are back for the second round of testing, and there's some interesting something interesting already. So as you've seen, I've taken that velocity stack out just to see if there's any difference in pressure when it's under full boost. You might be able to see, just in the background here, you might be able to see that boost gauge. The sun's reflecting off a little bit, but basically it boosts, it overboosts slightly to start with, goes up to sort of maybe 1.5, settles back down to a bar. This is ECU's asking for about 990 millibars, so just under a bar of pressure. You can clearly see when I first start the engine, it drops right down into vacuum, and that is the intake manifold pressure. So there's a lot more vacuum obviously in the intake manifold than there is in the crankcase, and that is because where the PCV, rear PCV valve goes into the inlet manifold, although it's a 19mm spigot, it's heavily reduced down. I think it's only about a 5mm hole. So that's why, you know, you're not seeing sort of minus whatever it would be, 0.5 bar, I don't know what even that is in the vac there. You're not seeing a massive vacuum in the crankcase. Obviously, if you were, it'd be pulling all the oil out, which is why it only needs to be half a PSI. So here you are again. I'll just turn it off and turn it back on, because we get, it's 25 minutes this stays on for before it goes off. Great little bit of kit so far. So let's just press it and hold it just to set it to 0. And I hope the camera's not wobbling about too much. It's just on a mobile phone hold on the windscreen, so I hope you can see it. Anyway, here we go. Let's start. Same bit of road. So make sure nothing's coming. So let's have a look at what we're getting. I'm going to try and concentrate on the road, but keep one eye on that. Here we go. Right, so, oh, one hand there. Right. Let's get up into third again. Get up to 3,500. Let's close that window. Okay. Here we go. Let's go. See, straight away, that's more, isn't it? We're looking at 30 there. We're looking at plus 30. So, you know, that velocity stack has made a difference. Obviously, as it channels the air coming into through the air filter, it's obviously cleaning it up, and it's pushing it through a slight restriction, which will be making it move slightly faster across the front of the hole in the air intake silicon tubing there, and that acts basically like a venturi. And I think hopefully I've explained in the video that that when you get the restrictions of the factory intake system, and that hole from the front PCV valve at where it comes out in front of the turbo inlet, that will create a venturi effect, which again causes a vacuum. So yeah, let's have another run up here. And a shame, what I should have done, and I don't think I can see that now. I can't do a test with all the original ducting in because I haven't got it, but I suspect if I did have it, it would show a negative pressure. So I hope you can see that. I can't see, but let's go. Right, here we go. 3 in third. Let's get a bit higher. Yeah, that's definitely sitting like foot flat down. Not much. Maybe I'm being a bit fussy, but that is definitely slightly more pressure. I didn't see what it was, whether it got up to 30. Let's drop it down the cog. Let's go. Okay, so we're still not getting much past 38 millibars, so you know, that's not bad. All the information leads me to believe that you shouldn't have any more than 38 millibars of pressure in the crankcase in these engines, so it doesn't look like we have. So maybe the key here is going to be putting that restrictor, that velocity stack restrictor in my airflow in front of the turbo there. It's definitely creating or helping with the venturi effect, which is reducing the pressure in the crankcase. The key here is going to be for me to speak to my engine tuner to see what he says, and maybe put it back on the rollers and see if it's made any difference to the power output, because obviously when this car's got a sort of stage 1 plus ish, just shy of 200 horsepower, you know, one of the things you need to get it up to there is a sort of more free flowing air induction system. And I know you're going to say I'm drawing warm air, but I've got a cold air duct in there, which I'm going to do a bit more work on. But yeah, my tuner will be the one that will basically be able to tell me whether that restriction is actually harming power or not bothering it at all. The Venturi stack, it's 75mm at its widest point and 50mm at its smallest point, and the inlet to my turbo is I think 45mm. So again, me being a bit of a simpleton, says that the restriction in my Venturi turret is less than the restriction of the intake of the turbo. But there we go, interesting. So yeah, a little more pressure without the Venturi, a little less with it. So, but either way, still, you know, in good shape in terms of crankcase pressure. The big test is going to be my next track day, where I think, as I've already said, it's going to spend a lot of its time, when it's not on boost, it's going to be on full boost. So that will be the key, and we'll see what happens there. So there you go, that is a video. I know it's not that short and it might be waffly, apologies if it is, on the sort of resolution / monitoring of the crankcase pressure / vacuum on one of these N14 Prince engines fitted to a Citroen DS3. I think, as I said, the Mini Brigade, not quite sure you're going to have those problems, but again, I haven't measured one, because you pretty much keep the factory ducting and just change to a high flow air filter, so I suspect it's all working as it should. And my man who's a Mini specialist, who's been working his magic on this engine, he was quite confident that the Minis showed negative crankcase pressure at all times. But again, really simple, that manometer and a bit of tubes, like 30 quid, 35 quid, and the new cap, so 40 quid all in. These engines particularly, your crankcase sort of pressures really do give you all kinds of information on sort of the health of your engine. You know, if your PCV system's working properly, obviously your crankcase pressure is the best way to check that. And as you know, PCV problems with the PCV on this can cause all kinds of issues, from unmetered air, running issues, oil consumption, you're blowing out seals, oil going everywhere. So yeah, I mean, obviously in an ideal world they'd put a crankcase pressure monitoring system on it from factory, but again, these cars are just for the general public. So I'm really glad I've got that on there now. Again, one thing I will say, I'm fairly handy on the spanners, been at it for quite a few years. If there's anyone watching this who is, you know, an expert and is sort of looking at this video with despair, saying I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm quite happy to concede to anyone else's knowledge on this. You know, if you've got anything to add or comment on what I've put here, negative or positive, please put it down in the comments. And then if anyone wants to read it, you know, hopefully we can get to, you know, the right information rather than the wrong information. Anyway, there you go. Hope you found this interesting and not too long. Thanks for watching.